Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today on a topic that I know you're really interested in, gold IRAs.
hmm
We've got some really interesting material to dig into here, especially, since you're considering building out a multi-asset portfolio for retirement.
Yeah, it seems like you're really thinking about, branching out beyond just the typical stocks and bonds. And you're right to do that. I mean, with all the uncertainty in the economy these days, exploring different options is really smart.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just so much talk about inflation and market volatility these days. It's enough to make anyone nervous about retirement.
Right. It's a lot to think about. And it's interesting. The material we have really highlights this concern. It really digs into how relying too heavily on traditional investments could leave your retirement savings vulnerable.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this idea of diversifying with gold, how does that actually play out, in the retirement plan? What exactly is a gold IRA?
Well, a gold IRA is basically a self-directed individual retirement account. But instead of holding stocks or bonds, you hold physical gold, actual gold coins or bars. So it's a way to add a tangible asset to your portfolio, something with a history of holding its value.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, having something concrete like that,
Hmm?
it seems kind of reassuring when the market feels so shaky. But how does it work in practice? It sounds a little complex to me.
It's actually more straightforward than you might think. You start by choosing a custodian, a company that basically manages the account and makes sure everything is following IRS regulations. They're the ones who handle your precious metals. Then you fund the account, which you can do by rolling over funds from an existing IRA or 401k, or by making direct contributions.
Okay, so you've got your custodian, you've got some funds in the account. What's next?
Well, next, you work with a provider to select the specific gold you want to purchase. Not just any gold will do, though. It has to be IRS approved, meaning it meets certain purity standards. Think American Eagle coins or Canadian maple leafs, for example. And once you've made your selection, the gold gets stored in a secure depository.
Got it, so no burying gold bars in the backyard.
Haha, probably not the best strategy. These depositories are specifically designed for precious metal storage, with layers of security and insurance. And the idea is that as the value of your gold hopefully appreciates over time, so do your retirement savings.
Okay, I see. I'm starting to see the appeal here. The material we have lays out some pretty compelling benefits, starting with gold's reputation as a hedge against inflation. Can you break down how that works?
Sure, so let's think about it this way. Inflation erodes the purchasing power of your money right. A dollar today buys you less tomorrow. Gold, on the other hand, has a history of retaining its value, even when currencies fluctuate.
Oh, so it's like insurance against rising prices.
Yeah, exactly. The material actually uses a great example. A woman named Sally. She was nearing retirement and really worried about inflation eating into her savings. Diversifying with gold offered her a way to potentially preserve her purchasing power. Now, gold doesn't generate income like dividends from stocks or anything, but it's considered a store of value that can help offset those losses from inflation.
That makes a lot of sense. And then there's the issue of market volatility. The material mentions the 2008 financial crisis and how gold performed during that time.
Right. That's a perfect example of why people often turn to gold during periods of uncertainty. When the stock market takes a tumble, gold often holds its value or even increases in price because it's seen as a safe haven. It's not about getting rich quick with gold, it's about stability and preservation.
So it can act as a sort of ballast for your portfolio when everything else is going haywire.
That's the idea, like having a safety net during a storm. Remember the story of John from the material? He saw his portfolio plummet during the 2008 crisis, but his gold holdings helped cushion the blow. Now, of course, past performance isn't a guarantee of future results, and gold prices can fluctuate too. But historically, it's demonstrated a certain resilience during market downturns.
Yeah, that's reassuring to hear, especially with the way things are right now. What about the tax implications of gold IRAs? Are there any advantages there?
Yeah, so similar to traditional IRAs, contributions to a traditional gold IRA might be tax deductible, depending on your income and other factors. And just like with the traditional IRA, you defer paying taxes on any growth until you start taking withdrawals during retirement. So that can be a big advantage, allowing your investments to grow tax-free for years.
Okay, so potential tax savings, a hedge against inflation, and a potential buffer against market volatility. Sounds like a pretty attractive package. But I've always had this idea that gold IRAs were just for the wealthy.
Yeah, that's actually a common misconception, and the material addresses this directly. You don't need to be a millionaire to invest in a gold IRA. You can start with a relatively small amount of gold and gradually build your holdings over time. It's all about finding a balance that works for your individual financial goals and risk tolerance.
That's good to know. But with anything involving gold, there's always that nagging worry about scams. How can you be sure you're dealing with a legitimate provider?
You're absolutely right to be cautious, and the material stresses the importance of doing your due diligence. Choosing a reputable provider is key, one that's properly licensed, regulated, and has a solid track record. Transparency is another crucial factor. You want a provider who is upfront about all the fees involved: custodian fees, storage fees, any transaction costs. There shouldn't be any hidden surprises.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's really about doing your homework, checking credentials, and making sure everything is clear and above board. What else should you keep in mind when choosing a provider?
Well, don't underestimate the power of reputation. Look for providers with a solid track record and positive reviews from other investors. It's worth taking the time to research and find a company you feel comfortable and trusting with your retirement savings.
Yeah, it seems like finding the right provider is just as important as understanding the ins and outs of gold IRAs themselves.
Absolutely. It's a partnership. You want a provider who is knowledgeable, trustworthy, and committed to helping you achieve your financial goals.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Right.
We've talked about what gold IRAs are, how they work, the potential benefits, and even how to avoid scams. Let's just pause for a moment and recap what we've learned so far.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
So first, we talked about the importance of diversification, especially in today's unpredictable economic climate. And it's clear that relying solely on traditional investments can expose you to a lot of risk.
Right. Adding alternative assets like gold can help create a more balanced and resilient portfolio.
Exactly. And then we dug into gold's role as a potential hedge against inflation. We saw how Sally from the material we discussed was concerned about rising prices eroding her savings. And gold's historical ability to hold its value even when currencies fluctuate makes it an attractive option for those worried about inflation.
Right. And it's important to remember that gold itself doesn't generate income. You're not going to get dividends like you would with stocks, but its value comes from its purchasing power stability over time.
Right, exactly. And then we discussed how gold can act as a potential buffer against market volatility. We heard about John, who saw his portfolio take a hit during the 2008 crisis, but his gold holdings helped soften the blow. Gold is often seen as a safe haven asset, something people turn to when the markets get turbulent.
Yeah. And of course, past performance is never a guarantee of future results. But gold's historical track record during market downturns is definitely something to consider.
Absolutely. We also explored the tax advantages of gold IRAs. Like traditional IRAs, you might be able to deduct contributions from your taxes and defer paying taxes on any growth until retirement.
Yeah, those tax benefits can really add up over time, allowing your investments to potentially grow more significantly.
For sure. And finally, we talked about the importance of choosing a reputable gold IRA provider, one that's licensed, regulated, transparent about fees, and has a solid reputation in the industry.
Right. Doing your due diligence and finding a trustworthy provider is absolutely crucial for a successful and secure investment experience.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier that gold doesn't generate income like stocks. Are there any other potential downsides to gold IRAs that we should be aware of?
That's a great question. While gold can be a valuable asset, it's important to consider the full picture. One thing to keep in mind is that gold can be illiquid. It's not as easy to buy or sell quickly as stocks or bonds. So if you need to access your funds quickly, gold might not be the most suitable option.
Yeah, that's an important point. You wouldn't want to be stuck trying to sell your gold in a hurry if you needed cash for an emergency.
Exactly. Another factor to consider is storage fees. You'll need to pay to store your gold securely in a depository, which can add to the overall cost of the investment.
Right, so those fees would need to be factored into your overall return calculations. Are there any other potential drawbacks?
Well, unlike stocks, which represent ownership in a company, gold doesn't have the same growth potential. It's not going to suddenly skyrocket in value because of some technological breakthrough or a surge in demand for a particular product. Its value tends to be more stable, which can be a good thing in terms of risk mitigation, but it also means the potential for explosive growth is limited.
Yeah, it seems like with any investment, there's always a trade-off between risk and potential reward. With gold, you're getting stability and a potential hedge against inflation and market volatility, but you're sacrificing some of the potential for high growth that you might get with stocks.
That's a great way to put it. It all comes down to your individual financial goals, risk tolerance, and how gold fits into your overall investment strategy.
Right. Now, the material we've been discussing focuses a lot on gold's historical performance as a reason to consider it for retirement planning. It makes a compelling case. But I'm curious to get your take on something. What about the future?
Haha, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The world is changing rapidly, and it's hard to predict what the future holds for any asset, including gold.
Exactly. We're seeing the rise of new technologies, geopolitical shifts, and a lot of economic uncertainty. Do you think gold's historical performance is a reliable indicator of how it will perform in the coming years?
It's certainly a factor to consider, but it's important to remember that the reasons why gold has been considered valuable have evolved over time. In the past, it was primarily about its use in coinage and jewelry. Today, its role as a financial asset, a hedge against uncertainty, is much more prominent.
Hmm. So the reasons we value gold are changing, which makes it even more difficult to predict its future trajectory.
Exactly. We have to consider factors that could potentially impact gold's price in the future. For example, the rise of cryptocurrencies as an alternative safe haven asset is something to keep an eye on.
That's interesting. Do you think cryptocurrencies pose a serious threat to gold's status as a safe haven?
It's too early to say for sure. Cryptocurrencies are still a relatively new and volatile asset class, and their long-term viability as a safe haven remains to be seen.
What about the possibility of new gold discoveries? Could that impact the supply and demand dynamics and potentially drive down prices?
That's always a possibility. New discoveries can certainly impact the supply of gold, but demand also plays a crucial role. And if economic uncertainty continues to rise globally, we could see demand for gold increase, potentially offsetting any increase in supply.
It seems like there are a lot of moving pieces to consider when thinking about gold's future.
Absolutely, it's a complex and ever-changing landscape.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly insightful. I'm starting to understand the appeal of gold as part of a retirement portfolio. But I'm also realizing that it's not a simple decision. There are many factors to weigh, both in terms of potential benefits and potential risks. It feels like this is a decision that requires more than just looking at, past performance. What would you say are the most important things to consider when deciding if a gold IRA is right for you?
I think the key is to approach it strategically, not emotionally. It's easy to get caught up in the allure of gold, but it's crucial to assess your individual financial situation, your goals, and your risk tolerance.
Right, so it's not just about chasing the next big thing or trying to time the market.
Exactly. A gold IRA should be part of a well-thought-out retirement plan, not a knee-jerk reaction to market volatility or a get-rich-quick scheme.
That makes sense. It's about aligning your investments with your overall financial goals
Mm.
and having a diversified approach that, mitigates risk.
Precisely. And it's crucial to have realistic expectations. Gold is unlikely to provide the same explosive growth potential as some stocks, but it can offer stability and act as a hedge against inflation.
Right. And we've talked about the importance of choosing a reputable provider, doing your research, understanding the fees involved. All of that plays a role in making an informed decision.
Absolutely. Don't rush into it. Take the time to educate yourself, talk to a financial advisor if needed, and weigh the pros and cons carefully.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. We've gone beyond just the basics of gold IRAs. We've explored the historical context, the potential benefits and drawbacks, the importance of due diligence, and even the uncertainties surrounding gold's future.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, and I hope it's given you a more nuanced understanding of this complex but potentially valuable investment option.
You definitely have. You've given me a lot to think about. Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the rise of cryptocurrencies. It seems like that's adding another layer of complexity to the whole idea of safe haven assets.
It definitely is. Cryptocurrencies are a disruptive force in the financial world, and their long-term impact is still unfolding. Some people believe they could eventually replace gold as the go-to safe haven, while others are more skeptical.
Yeah, it seems like the future of finance is becoming increasingly decentralized and digital. Do you think gold can maintain its relevance in this evolving landscape?
That's the big question. Gold has been a store of value for millennia, and its tangible nature continues to hold a certain appeal. But it's also facing competition from new digital forms of value.
So it's like a crossroads for gold. It's got this incredible history and this proven track record, but it also needs to adapt to a rapidly changing financial world.
Exactly. It's a fascinating time to be watching this unfold.
It really is. Well, we'll have to keep an eye on how this all plays out. For now, I think we've given you a solid foundation to continue your exploration of gold IRAs. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your financial future.
I couldn't agree more. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
That's great advice for all of us. Until next